The Colorado blizzard howled mercilessly outside as Eliza Blackwood peered through frosted windows at the endless white void beyond. The temperature had plummeted to 20 below zero, transforming her remote cabin into an island amid a frozen sea. 3 years since her husband Thomas had died from pneumonia. 3 years of facing this unforgiving mountain wilderness alone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The cabin stood defiant against the elements, but barely. Its pine walls were weathered by countless storms, the roof reinforced with whatever materials Eliza could salvage before each winter's arrival. A testament to human perseverance against nature's harshest challenges. Eliza stoked the fire in her stone hearth, watching as the flames devoured another precious log from her dwindling supply. The blizzard had arrived earlier than expected this year, catching many in the valley unprepared. Her nearest neighbor, the Miller homestead, was 5 miles east over terrain that became impassable during winter storms. She reached for the water bucket by the stove, noting with growing concern how ice had already formed around its edges, despite being inside. This was shaping up to be the harshest winter since she'd settled in Whispering Pines Valley 8 years ago with Thomas, and dreams of building a life away from the crowded streets of Boston. The winter of 1878 had already claimed 3 lives. In the county, Old Man Parker frozen in his barn when the door jammed during a sudden temperature drop. The Wilkinson twins lost while hunting, their bodies discovered days later preserved in snow like marble statues. The mountains showed no mercy to the unprepared or the unlucky. As Eliza moved to check her food stores, a noise outside cut through the wind's howl. Different, distinctive. She froze, straining to hear through the storm's fury. There it was again. Not the wind, not falling branches, but something else, something human. Her Winchester rifle hung above the door, loaded and ready as every frontier woman knew it must be. The nearest Cherokee settlement lay 20 miles northwest across the ridge, their uneasy peace with white settlers maintained mostly through distance and mutual avoidance. Raids were rare these days, but isolation made everyone vulnerable. Eliza took the rifle down, its familiar weight steadying her nerves. She moved cautiously to the window, using her sleeve to clear a small circle in the frost. The visibility was near zero, white flakes swirling so densely they formed a wall just feet from her porch. But there, barely visible against the snows, brightness. A darker shape moved, fell, then struggled to rise again. Every instinct told her to bar the door, to wait out whatever danger approached. Yet something in the figure's movements, the desperate struggle against elements that would soon claim another victim, compelled her to look closer. Wrapping herself in Thomas's old buffalo coat, she cracked open the door against the wind's fierce resistance. The cold hit her face like a physical blow, stealing her breath as she squinted into the storm. 20 feet from her porch, the figure had collapsed completely, a dark island in a sea of white. "Hello?" Her voice disappeared instantly into the wind's roar. "Can you hear me?" No response came from the motionless form. Eliza hesitated only briefly before making a decision that would alter everything that followed. Securing the rifle's strap across her back, she ventured into the blizzard, each step a battle against wind that seemed determined to throw her to the ground. When she reached the fallen figure, her stomach tightened with immediate understanding. Not just any traveler lost in the storm. The traditional buckskin leggings, though covered in snow and blood, were unmistakable. The dark hair, braided with hawk feathers, confirmed what the beaded medicine pouch around his neck already told her. Cherokee, and not a warrior, but a boy. He couldn't have seen more than 14 winters. His copper skin had taken on a bluish tinge from cold, his breathing shallow and rapid. Blood had frozen in a dark pattern across his right thigh, where something, an animal or a bullet, had torn through flesh and muscle. The nearest Cherokee settlement was a full day's ride. In good weather, how had this boy traveled so far alone, wounded, in a blizzard that would challenge even the most experienced mountain men? Eliza glanced back toward her cabin, its windows glowing with precious warmth that meant survival in these temperatures. The decision before her carried implications beyond simple Christian charity. Harboring Indians, especially now with tensions rising over the new silver mines being established on traditional Cherokee hunting grounds, could mark her as a sympathizer, or worse. Yet, as snow accumulated on the boy's still form, moral calculations, simplified to their essence, leave him to certain death or act. "God help us both," she whispered, then hoisted the boy across her shoulders in a carry she'd learned from Thomas during their first brutal winter. The weight nearly buckled her knees, young but solid with wiry muscle, but she managed to stay upright, fighting her way back toward the cabin, one agonizing step at a time. Inside, she laid him on the bearskin rug before the fire, quickly closing the door against the howling storm. The boy didn't stir as she removed his frozen outer garments, his skin alarmingly cold to the touch. Frostbite had already blackened the tips of 2 fingers on his left hand. The leg wound, revealed fully in the firelight, told a clearer story. The distinctive pattern of a steel trap, probably set for a wolf or mountain lion, had nearly severed muscle from bone. Eliza worked methodically, falling back on hard-earned frontier medicine. She cleaned the wound with whiskey from her precious medicinal supply, stitched torn flesh with boiled catgut, and applied a poultice of yarrow and pine resin to fight infection. Throughout her ministrations, the boy remained unconscious, though occasional murmurs in Cherokee passed his blue-tinged lips. Only after bandaging his leg did she allow herself to consider the full implications of her actions. If he died, she could bury him come spring thaw, and no one would be the wiser. If he lived, the boy's eyes snapped open suddenly, obsidian dark and immediately alert despite his condition. He jerked upright, reaching instinctively for a knife no longer at his belt, then fell back with a gasp of pain as the movement tore at his stitched wound. "Be still," Eliza said firmly, holding up empty palms to show she meant no harm. "Your leg is badly hurt." His eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the rifle she'd propped against the wall, the door's heavy wooden bar, the windows sealed against the storm. Calculating threats, escapes, even wounded and outnumbered, the boy's expression remained prideful, defiant. "Tsalagi?" she asked, using the word she'd heard the Cherokee call themselves. Surprise flickered briefly across his features before the mask of caution returned. He nodded once, a nearly imperceptible movement. "What's your name?" Eliza tried again, speaking slowly. The boy studied her face for a long moment, perhaps weighing what answering might cost him. Finally, he spoke, his voice stronger than she'd expected. "Waya Adohi." The words carried the cadence of his native tongue, musical yet somehow unyielding, like river stones worn smooth but never broken. "I'm Eliza," she replied, touching her chest. "Eliza Blackwood." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm's assault on the cabin walls and the fire's hungry crackle. She offered him water, which he accepted after a moment's hesitation, drinking deeply despite the obvious pain caused by moving. "Why help?" he finally asked, the English words heavily accented but clear. It was a fair question, one that had no simple answer. Because leaving any creature to die in a blizzard violated her most basic principles. Because in 3 years of widowhood, she'd come to understand vulnerability in ways her younger self never could. Because sometimes humanity had to transcend the boundaries others created. "Because you needed it," she said simply. The boy's eyes narrowed slightly, searching her face for deception. Finding none, he nodded again, this time with the faintest suggestion of respect. "My father," he began, then stopped, conflict crossing. His features, Is he nearby? Eliza felt a new tension build in her chest. One wounded boy was an act of mercy. An entire Cherokee hunting party was something else entirely. 3 days' ride. Wolf Clan camp. Relief and concern battled within her. Wolf Clan. Even isolated as she was, Eliza had heard stories. Their chief, a warrior called Grey Thunder, was said to be both a diplomatic leader who preferred peace and a fearsome fighter when roused to protect his people. The recent silver mine disputes had reportedly pushed him toward the latter. "How did you come to be alone, so far from your people?" she asked, already guessing the answer from his age and the pride that straightened his spine, despite obvious pain. "Vision quest," he confirmed. "To become a warrior. 4 days alone on the mountain." His hand went to the medicine pouch at his neck, fingers tracing symbols carved into leather. "Found vision. Then—" His gesture toward his wounded leg completed the thought. A ritual journey into manhood interrupted by steel teeth and winter's fury. Eliza understood enough about Cherokee customs to recognize the significance. This was no ordinary boy, but the son of someone important, undertaking sacred rites. His failure to return would not go uninvestigated. Night deepened around the cabin. As the blizzard intensified, Eliza built up the fire, prepared a thin broth from her dwindling supplies, and considered their situation with growing unease. The storm might last days, according to the signs she'd learned to read in the sky before it hit. By the time the weather cleared, the boy's absence would have been noted. Tracking parties would form, following his trail as soon as conditions allowed. Would they see her aid as kindness, or would finding their wounded son in a white woman's cabin be taken as something else entirely? Captivity, perhaps, or worse. Wyatt accepted the broth cautiously, his movements revealing both pain and stubborn self-control beyond his years. As he ate, Eliza noticed how his eyes catalogued everything in the cabin. The photographs of her and Thomas on their wedding day, the handmade quilt draped across her bed, the shelf of precious books she'd brought from Boston, the rifle she kept within reach. "Your husband?" he asked suddenly, nodding toward the photographs. "Yes," she replied, surprised by his perception. "Thomas. He died 3 winters ago." Something shifted in the boy's expression. Not quite softening, but a recognition of shared understanding. "My mother," he offered unexpectedly. 2 summers passed, fever sickness. The simple exchange created a momentary bridge across worlds that typically remained separate by choice and circumstance. Loss, it seemed, spoke a universal language that required no translation. "Your father will be worried," Eliza said after a while. Wyatt's face darkened. "He will come. With warriors." The words hung in the air between them, their implications clear. Once the storm cleared, she would face not just one Cherokee, but many, led by a chief with ample reason to distrust white settlers who had so often proven unworthy of any faith. "To find you," she clarified, needing to understand exactly what threat approached. "Not to raid." The boy considered this, his young face solemn with a maturity forced by frontier life. "To find me," he confirmed. "But if they think—" He didn't finish the thought. If they thought she had harmed him, captured him, or was holding him against his will, her cabin would offer no protection against their retribution. The precarious peace between settlers and Cherokee could shatter over one misunderstanding, one assumption made in anger or fear. The blizzard's howl seemed to intensify as night deepened, rattling the windows with gusts that found every crack in the cabin's defenses. Eliza checked Wyatt's wound again, relieved to find the bleeding had stopped, though fever had begun to flush his cheeks. Infection remained their most immediate concern. She prepared a stronger medicine, echinacea root steeped with willow bark, and helped him drink it despite its bitter taste. As she worked, she found herself speaking, partly to distract him from pain, partly to fill the strange silence between them. "I came here with Thomas, 8 years ago. We were going to build a cattle ranch, raise children, grow old, watching the mountains change with the seasons. She adjusted the compress on his forehead. The mountains had different plans. Wire listened without comment, but she sensed his attention never wavered. When she paused, he surprised her by asking, "Why stay? Alone is dangerous." It was a question she'd asked herself through countless solitary nights, through blizzards and spring floods, through summers when drought threatened, and autumns when bears grew desperate before hibernation. The answer remained elusive even to her, yet undeniably true. "This is home now," she said simply. "Where would I go?" The boy nodded as if this made perfect sense, this attachment to a place that transcended convenience or even safety. His people had understood such connections for generations before white settlers ever reached these mountains. As midnight approached, Wire's fever worsened. He drifted between consciousness and delirious murmuring in Cherokee, occasionally calling out what sounded like names. Eliza maintained her vigil, replacing compresses, spooning broth and medicine between his cracked lips, watching for the crisis she knew would come before healing could begin. The night stretched endlessly, measured in logs added to the fire and fresh snow building against the cabin walls. By dawn, the storm showed no signs of abating. Wind-driven snow had sealed the door completely, while drifts reached halfway up the windows. They were entombed in white, isolated more completely than any other time in Eliza's years on the mountain. Wire's fever broke near morning, leaving him weak but clear-eyed. He watched as Eliza prepared a meager breakfast from their dwindling supplies, cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of her precious honey. "Your people," he said unexpectedly as she worked, "will come also when the storm ends." Eliza paused, wooden spoon suspended over the pot. "My people, settlers, trappers." His gesture encompassed the valley beyond the snow-covered windows. "They see Cherokee tracks lead here." She hadn't considered this additional complication. While Cherokee warriors searching for the boy presented one type of danger, her neighbors, discovering she'd sheltered him, created another equally threatening scenario. Samuel Jenkins, who owned the trading post at Riverford Crossing, had lost family in Cherokee conflicts 20 years earlier. He made no secret of his belief that the only good Indian was a dead one. Others shared his sentiment, though perhaps less vocally. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "The snow will cover your tracks," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "No one will know you're here until you're well enough to return to your people." Wire's expression suggested he found her optimism naive, but wasn't inclined to argue. Instead, he reached for his medicine pouch, which she'd placed beside the pallet where he rested. Opening it carefully, he removed something wrapped in soft deerskin, unfolding the covering to reveal a carved wooden figure, a wolf in mid-stride, detailed with remarkable skill. "Protection," he explained, offering it to her. "Wolf spirit watches." The gesture struck Eliza with unexpected force. This was no small thing. Sharing sacred objects with outsiders, particularly those from a world that had given his people ample reason for distrust. She accepted the carving carefully, feeling its smooth contours worn by handling. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the trust they acknowledged. They passed the day in a strange domestic rhythm that gradually eased from awkwardness towards something approaching comfort. Eliza tended the fire, prepared food, and checked Wire's wound, which showed promising signs of healing. The boy, though clearly frustrated by weakness, attempted to contribute by sharpening her kitchen knives with skilled precision and teaching. Her simple Cherokee words for common objects, fire, atsi, water, ama, snow, anol, each word formed a small bridge across worlds normally separated by suspicion and history. By afternoon, the storm's fury had begun to diminish slightly. Not enough to venture outside, but the howling winds decreased to a persistent moan. Wire, growing stronger with each hour, moved from the pallet to sit at her small table, where he could see through the window toward the mountains beyond. 2 more days, he predicted, studying the sky's heavy grey mantle. Then my father will come. Many warriors. How many? Eliza asked, needing to prepare mentally for whatever approached. All Wolf clan. Maybe 100. His words carried no threat, merely stated fact, yet they sent a chill through her unrelated to the winter cold outside. 100 Cherokee warriors, including their chief, converging on her isolated cabin once the storm cleared. The image was both terrifying and somehow unreal, like a scenario from the dime novels she occasionally traded for at Jenkins' store. They won't harm you, Wire added unexpectedly. I will tell you what happened. His assurance, offered with childlike certainty that his word would be sufficient protection, touched her even as she recognized its potential naivety. Adult conflicts rarely yielded to simple truth when fear and suspicion clouded judgment. As evening approached again, Eliza found herself taking inventory of her situation with growing concern. Food supplies, adequate for 1 person through winter, would deplete quickly with 2. The boy's condition, while improving, remained precarious enough that travel through deep snow would likely reopen his wound, and beyond practical considerations loomed the larger uncertain future. Cherokee warriors approaching from one direction, potentially hostile settlers from another. She was checking the wound, pleased to find inflammation receding, when Wire suddenly tensed, his hand gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Listen, he whispered. At first, Eliza heard nothing beyond the storm's diminished moaning. Then it reached her, the distant but unmistakable sound of voices carried on the wind. Human voices, too far to distinguish words, but clear enough to recognize they were speaking English. Someone was approaching the cabin through the blizzard's remnants. Wire's eyes met hers, understanding passing between them without words. The tracks she'd hoped snow would cover had been discovered. Her neighbors had come, and their arrival now, with the Cherokee boy weak but conscious in her cabin, created a powder keg needing only a spark to explode. The voices grew closer, accompanied now by the distinctive sound of horses pushing through deep snow, at least 3 riders, perhaps more. Eliza moved quickly, helping Wire back to the pallet near the fire, then covering him with blankets before retrieving her rifle from beside the door. Stay quiet, she instructed. Whatever happens. The boy nodded once, his face composed despite the danger. He understood perfectly what discovery meant, not just for himself, but for the peace his father maintained and the woman who had saved his life. A heavy knock rattled the cabin door, seeming to shake the very logs that formed its walls. The sound echoed with decision time. Every choice Eliza had made since finding Wire in the snow had led to this moment, and what happened next would set in motion consequences beyond her control or prediction. She took a deep breath, glanced once more at the boy concealed near her hearth, and moved to answer. Part 2. Eliza's hand hovered over the door latch, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Mrs. Blackwood, you in there? The voice belonged to James Miller, her closest neighbor from 5 miles east. She glanced back at Wire, who lay motionless under the blankets, only his eyes visible and alert. With a silent prayer, she unbarred the door, opening it just enough to reveal her face, while blocking the view inside. The blast of cold air momentarily stole her breath as she confronted 3 men on horseback, their mounts steaming in the frigid air. James Miller sat atop his chestnut gelding, flanked by Samuel Jenkins from the trading post and young Henry Caldwell, whose family had settled in the valley just last spring. "Thank the Lord you're alive," Miller said, genuine relief in his voice. "When this blizzard hit without warning, Sarah and I feared the worst for folks living alone." I appreciate the concern, Eliza replied, keeping her tone even despite the tension coiling in her stomach. As you can see, I'm managing fine. Samuel Jenkins leaned forward in his saddle, his perpetually suspicious eyes studying the narrow opening she maintained at the door. Unlike Miller, whose concerns seemed genuine, Jenkins carried the hard edge of a man always searching for trouble. Saw some mighty strange tracks heading this way before the last snowfall covered them, Jenkins said, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. Indian tracks, if I'm not mistaken? Eliza felt her mouth go dry, but kept her expression neutral. The storm's been raging for 2 days, Samuel. Any tracks would be buried by now. These were fresh, Jenkins insisted. Cherokee, most likely. Been reports of their hunting parties venturing farther south than usual. Henry Caldwell nodded eagerly. Pa says they're getting bold with the cavalry stretched thin, testing boundaries. Well, I haven't seen anyone, Eliza stated firmly. Indian or otherwise. Miller seemed satisfied with her answer, but Jenkins continued, staring past her, trying to glimpse the cabin's interior. Mind if we come in for a spell? Warm ourselves before heading back? Been a long, cold ride checking on folks. The request was reasonable, expected even, given frontier hospitality, which made refusal all the more suspicious. Yet letting 3 men inside with wire present risked everything. I'm afraid I'm battling a touch of fever, she improvised. Wouldn't want to risk spreading it, especially with the doctor snowed in at Riverford. Miller immediately looked concerned. Anything we can do? Sarah has some willow bark tea that works wonders. Nothing serious, Eliza assured him. Just need rest and quiet. I truly appreciate you checking on me, though. Jenkins wasn't so easily deterred. Strange time to turn away. Company Mrs. Blackwood, especially with potential hostiles in the area. Samuel, Miller chided. The lady's unwell. We've confirmed she's safe, which was our purpose. A tense silence followed, broken only by the horses shuffling in the deep snow. Eliza maintained her position, neither opening the door wider nor backing down from Jenkins' suspicious glare. At least let us bring in some firewood for you, Jenkins pressed. Wouldn't want you venturing out while feverish. Before Eliza could formulate another excuse, a sound from inside the cabin, the slight shift of wire adjusting his position, caught Jenkins' attention. His hand moved from resting near his revolver to gripping it outright. Someone else. In there with you, Mrs. Blackwood? The moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one suspicious movement, and Jenkins would force his way inside, discovering wire and potentially igniting violence that would cascade beyond this mountain valley. Just my cat, she lied smoothly. Thomas brought him home as a kitten before he passed. Keeps the mice at bay and me company through these long winters. Miller chuckled, the tension momentarily broken. That old tomcat is still alive, must be ancient by now. Going on 12 years, Eliza confirmed, building on the fabrication. Moves slower these days, but still earns his keep. Jenkins clearly remained unconvinced. But with Miller and Caldwell accepting her explanation, he had little grounds to press further without appearing unreasonable. If you're certain you're all right, Miller said. Truly, and I'm grateful for neighbors who check on each other. Perhaps when this snow clears, you'll bring Sarah for tea. The invitation, offered with deliberate normalcy, further diffused suspicions. Even Jenkins seemed to reconsider his position, though his eyes continued scanning what little he could see of the cabin's interior. Very well, Miller finally concluded. But if you need anything at all, fire 3 shots in the air. We'll come. Running! Eliza nodded her thanks, maintaining her position at the barely open door until the 3 men turned their horses and began the difficult journey back through snow-choked paths. Only when they disappeared beyond the tree line did she close and bar the door, her legs suddenly weak with released tension. Washer sat up immediately, his dark eyes serious. They will come back. Perhaps, she acknowledged, moving to the window to confirm the men weren't circling around to spy. "But not today, at least." "The one with angry eyes," Wire observed. "He does not believe your cat story." Despite the gravity of their situation, Eliza found herself smiling at the boy's perceptiveness. Samuel Jenkins has never believed anything that doesn't confirm what he already thinks. "Dangerous man," Wire stated with certainty beyond his years. "Has killed my people before." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, a reminder of the blood-soaked history that made their current situation so precarious. Not abstract conflicts between nameless groups, but specific violence carried out by individuals who still lived, still remembered, still harbored grievances that could ignite at the slightest provocation. "How can you know that?" she asked, though somehow unsurprised by the assertion. Wire touched his medicine pouch. "His eyes tell a story. Spirit shows truth." Whether supernatural insight, or simply the keen observation skills developed by a culture where survival depended on reading enemies accurately, Eliza couldn't dismiss the possibility. Jenkins had fought in several frontier conflicts and never concealed his hatred for native peoples. Moving to check Wire's wound, Eliza found the bandages had stayed secure despite his quick movements to hide. The inflammation continued receding, though the damage from both the trap and subsequent exposure would leave permanent scars. "We need to prepare," she said, thinking aloud as she worked. "Jenkins won't be satisfied with what he saw today. Or didn't see," Wire added with unexpected dry humor. Their eyes met, and for the first time since finding him in the snow, Eliza witnessed something approaching a smile transform the boy's solemn features. The brief lightness felt incongruous, against their circumstances, yet somehow necessary, a reminder that beyond survival lay humanity's perpetual capacity for finding connection even across the deepest divides. The moment passed quickly as Wire turned serious again. "I must leave before they return." "Your leg can't handle that journey yet," Eliza countered, "especially through deep snow. Better risk than what happens if they find me here." The simple truth in his words couldn't be denied. Discovery would endanger them both. Eliza branded as an Indian sympathizer, perhaps worse, and Wire potentially facing summary frontier justice at Jenkins' hands before any Cherokee warriors could intervene. "We have until tomorrow at least," she reasoned. "The snow's still too deep for easy travel, and they won't expect me to venture out while feverish." As evening approached, they worked together, forming contingency plans. Eliza gathered emergency supplies into a pack Wire could carry if forced to flee. Jerky, bandages, matches wrapped in oilskin, a small knife he could conceal easily. Meanwhile, the boy sketched a crude map in the hearth ashes, showing alternate routes he might take to reach his people if separated from the main trails. "Wolf Clan camp here," he explained, indicating a protected valley beyond 3 mountain ridges. 2 days' normal journey, more in the snow with bad leg. Eliza committed the landmarks to memory, a distinctive split rock formation, a waterfall that would be frozen now but still recognizable, a stand of lightning-struck pines that marked the boundary of traditional Cherokee hunting grounds. "If anything happens," she said carefully, "if we're separated, or if men come while I'm away from the cabin, try to follow Cottonwood Creek north. It's usually the first to thaw, making travel easier along its banks." Wire nodded, absorbing the information with the focused attention of someone whose survival might depend on remembering correctly. His finger traced the ash-drawn creek, then continued to a smaller mark she'd made, representing her cabin. "Why do you help?" he asked again, the question that had clearly troubled him since waking in a stranger's home. "No danger, still help." Eliza considered how to answer in terms that would make sense across their different worlds. "My father was a minister in Boston," she finally said. He taught that what makes us human isn't how we treat those like us, but how we act toward those who are different, especially when it costs us something. The explanation felt incomplete even to her own ears, failing to capture the instinctive response that had driven her into the blizzard rather than any conscious moral calculus. Sometimes understanding followed action rather than preceding it. Cherokee have similar teaching, Wire offered unexpectedly. All paths cross somewhere. How we walk together shows true spirit. The simple philosophy bridged their different upbringings with surprising ease. Despite language barriers and cultural differences, certain core values appeared universal, recognition of shared humanity that transcended superficial distinctions. Night settled fully around the cabin as they continued preparations. Eliza checked and rechecked her rifle, counting ammunition and positioning weapons for quick access if needed. Wire, despite her protests that he should rest, insisted on teaching her several Cherokee words that might prove useful if she encountered his father's warriors. Phrases to indicate friendship, to explain his presence, to convey that she had helped rather than harmed him. Donadagovi, she repeated carefully, struggling with the unfamiliar sounds. Peace. Good, Wire approved. Say this first. Always. The language lesson continued until exhaustion finally claimed the boy, his wounded body requiring rest, despite his determination to remain vigilant. Eliza watched him sleep for a time, struck by how young he appeared with defenses lowered, not the solemn young warrior preparing for manhood's responsibilities, but simply a child far from home, vulnerable despite his courage. Her own rest came in fitful bursts, every sound from the settling cabin or the forest beyond snapping her back to alertness. The knowledge that danger approached from multiple directions, Jenkins and his suspicions from one side, Cherokee warriors from another, made true sleep impossible. Dawn arrived with clearing skies, the storm's fury finally spent after 3 days of unrelenting assault. Sunlight sparkled across an unbroken blanket of white that transformed the mountain landscape into something both beautiful and treacherous. Snow had drifted against the cabin's eastern wall, nearly to the roofline, while the western exposure showed bare patches where wind had scoured the ground clean. Eliza checked the neighboring ridge through her window, relieved to find no sign of approaching riders from the settlement. The improved weather meant Jenkins could return with reinforcements, no longer hindered by blizzard conditions. It also meant Cherokee warriors would begin their search for the chief's missing son, following whatever trail remained visible beneath the snow's frozen crust. Wire joined her at the window, moving with greater ease than the previous day. His resilience continued to impress her. Wounds that might have killed a full-grown man, healing with remarkable speed in this determined boy. Today they will come, he stated with certainty. My father's scouts first, then warriors. How can you be sure it's today? Eliza asked, hearing no hoofbeats, seeing no signs of approach from any direction. Wire pointed toward the western sky. Red-tailed hawk circles 3 times, scout signal bird. Tells others the path is clear now. Eliza squinted upward, barely making out the distant bird's silhouette against the morning light. Whether coincidence or genuine Cherokee signaling methods, she couldn't dismiss the possibility. Native communication systems had confounded settlers for generations, allowing coordination across vast distances through means white observers often failed to recognize. How long before they arrive? Sun at highest point, Wire estimated, studying the light's angle. Midday. That left precious little time for final preparations. If Jenkins and the settlers arrived before the Cherokee, their situation would become infinitely more dangerous. Eliza packed additional supplies, concealing them around the cabin exterior where they could be retrieved if necessary. She helped Wire test his injured leg, supporting his weight as he practiced moving quickly, despite the pain each step caused. By mid-morning, the boy's strength had improved enough that he could stand alone, though running remained beyond his capabilities. The trap's damage to his thigh muscle meant he would always carry a slight limp, a permanent reminder of his interrupted vision quest, and the white woman who had saved him from freezing to death. "If settlers come first," Eliza instructed, "hide in the root cellar. The entrance is concealed beneath the bearskin rug. Only come out when you hear me say 'all clear' 3 times. Wire nodded, memorizing the escape route and the signal phrase. "If my father's warriors come first," he countered, "stay inside. Let me speak before you show yourself." Some young warriors act before thinking. Their mutual concern for each other's safety created an unexpected bond that transcended their brief acquaintance. 2 people from worlds typically separated by suspicion and conflict, now united in trying to protect each other from the violence their association might trigger. Wire suddenly tensed, his hand freezing halfway to his mouth. "Listen." At first, Eliza heard nothing beyond the occasional wind gust and distant crow calls. Then it reached her, the faint but unmistakable rhythm of multiple horses moving through deep snow coming from the northwest. Not from the settlement's direction, but from the mountains where Cherokee hunting grounds began. "My father," Wire confirmed, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his young face: relief at rescue, concern for what would follow, and something less definable. Perhaps regret that their unlikely alliance would soon end. Eliza moved to the west-facing window, heart pounding as she scanned the tree line. Nothing yet visible, but the sounds grew steadily closer, many horses, moving with purpose rather than caution. "How many?" she whispered, though there was no one else to hear. "Many," Wire replied, joining her at the window. "More than expected." When they finally emerged from the forest's edge, the sight stole Eliza's breath. Not the small search party she had imagined, but a full war party. At least 60 mounted warriors in formation, weapons prominently displayed, faces painted with symbols she couldn't interpret, but whose seriousness required no translation. At their head rode a massive figure on a black stallion, a man whose bearing commanded attention even at distance. Unlike the others, he wore a combination of traditional Cherokee garments and items adopted from white culture. A cavalry officer's jacket incongruously paired with buckskin leggings and beaded moccasins. A single eagle feather stood upright. In his long black hair, which showed no trace of gray despite his apparent age. "Gray Thunder," Wire confirmed, unexpected pride evident in his voice. "My father." Eliza felt her mouth go dry as the war party approached her cabin with deliberate speed. Not just any Cherokee war party, but one led by the most powerful chief in the region, a man whose alliance or enmity could determine the fate of settlements throughout the territory. And she had his son, wounded and wearing borrowed clothes, standing beside her in a cabin that suddenly seemed impossibly fragile against what approached. "What now?" she managed, the question encompassing too many uncertainties to name individually. Wire squared his shoulders despite his injury, suddenly less the wounded boy and more the son of a chief preparing to fulfill his responsibilities. "Now we hope the truth is enough." The warriors formed a semicircle around her cabin, close enough that Eliza could distinguish individual faces, some young and eager, others weathered by years of conflict. All focused with unnerving intensity on the small structure where she stood watching through frosted glass. Gray Thunder raised his hand, and the entire party halted in perfect coordination. No orders shouted, no signals Eliza could detect beyond that simple gesture. The chief dismounted, his movements controlled and deliberate despite his considerable size. 2 older warriors flanked him immediately as he approached the cabin door, their protective formation suggesting his importance to the tribe. Wire moved toward the door, but Eliza caught his arm. "Let me go first," she said. "Show I'm not holding." "You prisoner." The boy hesitated, then nodded his understanding. This moment would establish everything that followed. First impressions that could either diffuse potential violence or ignite it beyond control. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Eliza unbarred the door and stepped onto her porch, unarmed and alone, to face 60 Cherokee warriors and the father of the boy she had saved from certain death. The mountain air bit into Eliza's exposed skin as she stood on her cabin porch, facing Grey Thunder and his warriors. Time seemed suspended in the crystalline winter light as 60 pairs of eyes assessed her, measuring intent, searching for deception, calculating threat. No one spoke. The silence stretched until it became its own form of communication. Grey Thunder took a single step forward, his massive frame blocking the weak winter sun. Up close, his presence was even more imposing, not just physical size, but the gravity of leadership etched into every line of his weathered face, a face that had witnessed decades of broken promises, forced relocations, and desperate battles to protect what remained of his people's way of life. "My son," he said in English, far more fluent than Wyer's, each word deliberate and weighted with authority. Not a question, but a statement that demanded response. "He's inside," Eliza replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "His leg was injured in a trap. I found him in the snow during the blizzard." Grey Thunder's obsidian eyes never left her face, searching for truth or deception in her words. Behind him, warriors shifted slightly, hands never far from weapons. "He's alive because of you." The chief's question contained complexities beyond its simple phrasing, an acknowledgement of debt, potentially at war, with suspicion of ulterior motives. Before Eliza could respond, the cabin door opened behind her. Wyer stepped forward on his injured leg, the slight wince of pain visible only to someone watching as carefully as she was. Despite his discomfort, he stood tall, chin raised in the manner of his father. "Father," he said in Cherokee, then switched to English. "She saved me when others would have left me to die." The tension among the warriors visibly shifted. Some relaxed their postures slightly, while others exchanged glances of surprise. Grey Thunder's expression remained unreadable as he assessed his son's condition with a father's critical eye. "The trap?" he asked, gaze dropping to Wyer's bandaged leg. "Hunter's trap in North Valley," the boy explained. "I tried to free myself. Blizzard came, would have frozen without her help." Grey Thunder nodded once, absorbing this information before returning his attention to Eliza. "You tend his wounds?" "Yes, the trap did significant damage, but there's no infection. He's healing well, though he'll need time before traveling far." A flicker of something, perhaps approval, perhaps mere acknowledgement, crossed the chief's stern features. He turned, speaking rapid Cherokee to the older warriors flanking him. Their responses came quickly, accompanied by gestures toward the mountains and then the direction of the settlement, Wyer translated in low tones for Eliza's benefit. "He asks if I completed my vision quest. They tell him yes. Surviving the trap and blizzard was my test. Greater than planned." This information seemed to satisfy Grey Thunder, who returned his attention to Eliza with a slight shift in his stance, less confrontational, though caution remained evident in every line of his powerful frame. "Why help, Cherokee boy?" he asked, the question direct and unavoidable. "Your people and mine shed much blood," the same question Wyer had asked, now repeated by his father with the weight of tribal leadership behind it. Eliza recognized the moment's importance. Her answer would determine what followed, not just for herself, but potentially for relations between settlers and Cherokee throughout the region. "I helped because he needed help," she answered simply. "The conflicts between our peoples didn't matter at that moment, only that a child was dying in the snow and I could prevent it." Grey Thunder studied her face with such intensity that Eliza felt as though he could see beyond her words, to the thoughts behind them. Finally, he nodded again, this time with definite approval. "Truth has its own voice," he said. "I hear it in your words." The acknowledgement should have relieved tension, but before any further exchange could occur, new sounds disrupted the fragile moment. Horses approaching rapidly from the east, not the measured pace of Cherokee warriors, but the urgent gallop of men riding hard through difficult terrain. Grey Thunder's posture changed instantly, the brief openness vanishing as he turned toward the new threat. A sharp command in Cherokee sent his warriors repositioning with practiced efficiency, some spreading outward to create a defensive perimeter, others moving to protective formations near their chief and his son. Eliza's stomach clenched as she recognized the approaching riders, Jenkins at the lead, followed by at least 15 armed men from the settlement. No wellness check this time, but a fully armed party riding with clear purpose toward her cabin. Jenkins must have convinced others of his suspicions after yesterday's visit. "Samuel Jenkins," she explained quickly to Grey Thunder. "He hates all Cherokee. Suspected your son was here yesterday." The chief's eyes narrowed. "How many guns?" "Too many," she replied honestly, counting the approaching settlers. "At least 15 men, all armed." Grey Thunder turned to his warriors, issuing rapid commands that Wire translated for her benefit. He's positioning warriors behind trees, not attacking first, but ready. "There has to be another way," Eliza insisted, fear rising as she imagined her small clearing becoming a battlefield. If shooting starts, many will die on both sides. The approaching settlers had spotted the Cherokee war party now, their previously orderly approach dissolving into shouted warnings and hasty defensive positions. Jenkins' voice carried across the distance, barking orders as rifles were raised and horses positioned for potential combat. "I knew it!" His shout reached them clearly. "The widow's been consorting with savages!" Grey Thunder's warriors bristled. At the insult, bows drawn and rifles lifted in response to the settlers' aggressive posture. The situation balanced on the edge of violence that, once begun, would spread beyond this isolated clearing to engulf communities throughout the territory. In that crucial moment, Eliza made her decision. Stepping forward into the open space between opposing forces, she raised both arms to make herself visible to everyone. "Stop!" she called, voice cutting through the tension. "There's no need for bloodshed here!" Jenkins urged his horse forward, rifle aimed not at her, but at Grey Thunder. "Step aside, Mrs. Blackwood. These Indians have clearly taken you hostage." "I'm not a hostage," she countered firmly. "Chief Grey Thunder came to retrieve his son who was injured and caught in the blizzard. I've been caring for him until he could travel. Caring for an Indian." Jenkins spat the words. "Have you lost your mind, woman? These savages murdered the Peterson family just last month." Grey Thunder stepped forward, his deep voice resonating across the clearing. "Not Cherokee, never attacked Peterson Place. Arapaho raiders from north." "All Indians lie," Jenkins retorted, his finger tightening on his trigger, "just like they lied before massacring my brother's family 10 years back." The personal revelation explained much about Jenkins' hatred, but did nothing to diffuse the current standoff. If anything, the shared history of pain on both sides, Jenkins's murdered family, Cherokee losses to militia attacks, made peaceful resolution seem increasingly impossible. Wire limped forward to stand beside Eliza, his mild, young face solemn with understanding beyond his years. "Fighting solves nothing," he said clearly, addressing both groups. "My father came in peace to find his son, not to make war." The boy's courage in placing himself between armed men impressed even some of the settlers, whose weapons lowered slightly, in response to the unexpected sight of a wounded Cherokee youth standing protectively near a white woman. "He's just a boy," Miller spoke up from among the settlers, his voice carrying doubt that undermined Jenkins's certainty. "If Mrs. Blackwood says she's been helping him, I believe her." "She's been bewitched," Jenkins insisted. but with less conviction. As other settlers murmured among themselves or threatened into cooperation, Grey Thunder raised his hand in the Cherokee gesture for peaceful talk. "We take my son and go. No one was harmed. No more blood between us today." The chief's reasonable tone contrasted sharply with Jenkins' increasing agitation. Several settlers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly questioning whether they had been brought here under false pretenses. Miller moved his horse closer to Jenkins. "Samuel, there's 60 Cherokee warriors here. If they wanted violence, we'd already be dead. They're just retrieving the boy. Let's not start something we can't finish." The standoff wavered, balanced between Jenkins's personal vendetta and the growing realization among the settlers that they were significantly outnumbered by warriors who, despite ample provocation, had not yet fired a single arrow or bullet. Sensing the shifting mood, Eliza pressed her advantage. "The Cherokee have been peaceful for years now. The raids you're attributing to them were carried out by other tribes, as the Army's own reports confirm. Chief Grey Thunder signed the peace treaty at Fort Gibson and has honored its terms." Jenkins's rifle remained aimed at Grey Thunder, but doubt had begun to creep into his expression. The other settlers were actively lowering their weapons now, unwilling to precipitate a massacre when evidence of Cherokee hostile intent seemed increasingly thin. "Samuel," Miller tried again, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't make widows out of our wives because of what happened to your brother's family. That was a different time, different Indians." The mention of widows struck home. Jenkins' gaze flickered to Eliza, standing exposed between opposing forces, and something in his rigid certainty finally cracked. With visible reluctance, he lowered his rifle. "If anything happens to any settler family after this," he warned, "I'll hold you personally responsible, Chief, every last one of you." Grey Thunder acknowledged the conditional surrender with dignified restraint. "Cherokee protect peace where we can. Cannot promise what other tribes do. But the Wolf Clan honors word." The tension drained from the clearing like air from punctured bellows. Warriors and settlers maintained their positions, but the immediate threat of bloodshed had passed. In its place came the awkward uncertainty of enemies who find themselves neither fighting nor exactly at peace, occupying the uncomfortable space between open conflict and genuine understanding. Taking advantage of the fragile calm, Eliza ushered Wire back toward the cabin. "Let me gather his things. He'll need proper clothing for the journey back to your camp." Grey Thunder nodded permission, then turned to address his warriors in Cherokee. Many dismounted at his command, though they maintained vigilant positions around the perimeter. Inside the cabin, Eliza worked quickly to pack supplies, while Wire changed into his original clothing, now cleaned and mended during his recovery. "You stand between angry bears," he observed quietly. "Very brave, very dangerous." "Sometimes the most dangerous place is the only useful one," she replied, securing bandages and medicines in a pouch he could carry. "Your father is a wise man. He could have attacked when he saw armed settlers approaching, but he waited. He carries many seasons of fighting, knows its cost." Wire touched the carved wolf figure she had placed among his belongings. "Keep this. Protection continues." The simple gift conveyed layers of meaning, acknowledgement of debt, offer of alliance, symbolic extension of tribal protection to an outsider who had earned it through her actions rather than birth. "Thank you," she said, accepting the carving with appropriate solemnity. "Will you be all right? The journey back to your camp won't be easy on that leg." Wire smiled slightly, the expression transforming his solemn features. "Cherokee boys learn pain early makes men stronger." Despite his brave words, Eliza insisted on providing a walking stick she had carved from hickory during his recovery, sturdy enough to support his weight over difficult terrain, small enough not to hinder his movement if danger arose. When they emerged from the cabin, an unexpected scene greeted them. Grey Thunder and James Miller were engaged in cautious conversation, while warriors and settlers maintained respective distances, but without the earlier hostility. Jenkins sat apart on his horse, watchful but no longer actively threatening violence. "Your chief and our neighbor appear to be finding common ground," Eliza observed. "Good talking prevents bad fighting," Wire replied, with the pragmatism that continued to surprise her from one so young. Grey Thunder approached as they reached the porch steps, his imposing presence somehow less threatening now that immediate conflict had been averted. He examined his son carefully, noting the bandaged leg, the walking stick, and the pack of supplies Eliza had prepared. "You heal my son," he stated, meeting her eyes directly. "Wolf Clan remembers." The simple acknowledgement carried significant weight in Cherokee culture, Eliza knew. Obligation and alliance were foundational concepts, not taken lightly nor casually invoked. "I'm glad I could help," she responded, matching his directness. "Wire is brave and strong. He will make a fine warrior when his leg heals completely." Pride flickered briefly across the chief's stern features. He completed a vision quest, found courage in pain, returns a man, not a boy. Wire straightened at his father's words, the recognition clearly meaningful beyond any physical discomfort he still endured. The rite of passage, interrupted by steel trap and winter storm, had been completed nonetheless, perhaps more profoundly than if it had proceeded without incident. "The trap will leave scars," Eliza told Grey Thunder, "but with proper care and exercise, he should regain most function. The walking patterns I showed him will help strengthen the damaged muscles." The chief nodded his understanding. "Our medicine women will continue what you began." As preparations for departure commenced, Miller approached Eliza cautiously, keeping a respectful distance from the Cherokee warriors who watched his every move. "You took quite a risk, Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly. "Not everyone would have shown such compassion." "It wasn't a decision, James. Not really. You can't calculate the right thing when someone is dying in front of you. You just act." Miller glanced toward Jenkins, who remained isolated from the impromptu truce discussions. "Samuel will never understand that. Too much pain clouds his judgment where Indians are concerned." "Pain clouds everyone's judgment," Eliza observed, "on both sides. Perhaps that's why healing has to start somewhere. With one injured boy, one storm, one choice to see the person rather than the conflict." Their conversation was interrupted as Grey Thunder signaled readiness to depart. Warriors, mounted with fluid grace, forming protective formations around their chief and his son. Wire, assisted by 2 warriors, settled onto a spotted pony selected for its gentle gait that would minimize jarring to his injured leg. Before mounting his own black stallion, Grey Thunder approached Eliza one final time. From around his neck, he removed a pendant carved from polished stone, a circular design with intricate symbols she couldn't interpret. "Protection," he explained, placing it in her palm. "Show this if Cherokee warriors come. They know Grey Thunder's mark." The unexpected gift rendered Eliza momentarily speechless. To receive such a token from a chief was rare enough for any white person, but its practical value as protection in uncertain borderlands made it more precious than gold in these mountains. "I am honored," she managed finally, slipping the cord. Over her head, Grey Thunder nodded once, then turned toward his waiting horse. No further words were necessary between them. The essential understanding had been established through actions rather than speech. As the Cherokee prepared to depart, Jenkins finally broke his silence, urging his mount forward to address Grey Thunder directly. "This changes nothing between our peoples," he declared, bitterness evident in every word. "One good deed doesn't erase generations of bloodshed." The chief regarded him thoughtfully, neither angry nor dismissive of the settler's pain. "True words," he acknowledged. but the new path begins with a single step. Today, we step without new blood between us. Tomorrow waits to see what path we choose. The philosophical response clearly wasn't what Jenkins had expected. He retreated without further comment, though hatred still smoldered in his eyes, banked temporarily rather than extinguished. Wire guided his pony alongside Eliza's porch for a final farewell. Despite days of sharing her cabin, cultural divides made traditional goodbyes seem inadequate. Instead, he simply touched 2 fingers to his heart, then extended them toward her, a gesture she understood without translation. "Donadagovi," she said carefully, using the Cherokee word for peace he had taught her. The boy's solemn face brightened with unexpected warmth. "Until next snow," he replied in English. "I return to show healed leg." Before she could respond to this surprising promise of continued connection, Grey Thunder signaled departure. The entire war party moved out with coordinated precision, forming protective flanks around their chief and his son as they disappeared into the forest from which they had emerged earlier. The settlers lingered, uncertain how to process what they had witnessed. Most had arrived expecting to rescue a widow from savage captors. Instead, they had participated in an unprecedented peaceful resolution between peoples whose relationship had been defined by conflict for generations. "Best get back before dark," Miller announced, taking charge now that the immediate situation had concluded. Snow's still deep in the northern passes. As the settlers prepared to depart, Jenkins remained behind, his expression unreadable as he studied Eliza. "You've changed things," he said finally, "not necessarily for the better." "I helped an injured child," she replied simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." "You've aligned yourself with Indians over your own kind," he countered. "People won't forget that." The implicit threat hung between them, but Eliza found herself strangely unafraid. The pendant against her chest seemed to radiate warmth, a tangible reminder that she now existed between worlds, not fully belonging to either, but perhaps uniquely positioned to bridge both. "Cherokee have long memories too," she said quietly. "Grey Thunder remembers who threatened his son today, just as he remembers who helped him." Jenkins' expression darkened, but he offered no retort. With a sharp jerk of his reins, he turned his horse and rode after the departing settlers, leaving Eliza alone in the clearing that had so nearly become a battlefield. As silence settled around her cabin once more, broken only by the occasional wind gust dislodging snow from pine boughs, Eliza touched the stone pendant and the carved wolf figure Wire had insisted she keep. 2 tokens from different generations of Cherokee warriors, unexpected connections forged through a single act of mercy during a blizzard. The mountain winter still stretched ahead, isolation and hardship its constant companions. But something fundamental had shifted in her relationship to this harsh landscape and its complex human geography. No longer merely Thomas Blackwood's widow struggling to survive alone, she had become something new and undefined, a bridge between worlds that had previously connected only through violence. Inside her cabin, she added logs to the dying fire, watching flames leap to life with renewed vigor. Outside, the sun began its early winter descent, painting snow-covered peaks with rose and gold. Somewhere in those vast mountains, a Cherokee war party carried a wounded boy home, and with him a story about a white woman who had chosen compassion over fear. Whether that story would change anything beyond this isolated moment remained to be seen. But as darkness gathered around her small homestead, Eliza recognized that sometimes the most profound transformations begin not with grand gestures or formal treaties, but with simple human choices made in moments that test what we truly value. 2 weeks passed since the confrontation in Eliza's clearing. February had tightened its grip on the mountains, bringing shorter storms but deeper cold that transformed the landscape into brittle crystal. Breath froze in midair, water buckets iced over within minutes indoors, and the surrounding forest fell silent as wildlife conserved precious energy for survival. Eliza's life had returned to its solitary rhythm, tending her meager winter garden in the south-facing lean-to, maintaining endless vigilance against cold that sought entry through every cabin seam, and stretching dwindling supplies that wouldn't be replenished until spring trails cleared. Yet something fundamental had changed within this familiar pattern. News of her encounter with Grey Thunder's war party had spread throughout the scattered settlement. Some neighbors, like the Millers, increased their visits, bringing small gifts of preserved food or extra firewood with each journey. Silent support for her actions, though they rarely mentioned the Cherokee boy directly. Others maintained conspicuous distance, crossing to opposite boardwalks when she visited Riverford for necessary supplies, or falling silent when she entered Jenkins' trading post. The settlement had divided over her choice, invisible lines drawn between those who viewed compassion as a strength and those who considered it dangerous weakness in frontier living. Eliza found herself occupying a strange new position, neither outcast nor fully embraced, existing in the uncertain territory between established boundaries. Samuel Jenkins maintained the most visible opposition, his trading post becoming a gathering place for those who shared his uncompromising views on proper relations with native peoples. Though he never refused to sell her goods, his cold courtesy and inflated prices spoke volumes about his judgment. "Heard some interesting news from Fort Gibson yesterday," he remarked during her latest visit, the casual tone belied by watchful eyes. "Seems the Army's reinforcing outposts throughout the territory. Indian troubles brewing again." Eliza selected coffee beans carefully, avoiding his attempt to provoke reaction. Winter's usually quiet. Both sides tend to stay close to home in this weather. "Not this year," Jenkins countered. "Reports of Cherokee warriors moving in larger groups than usual. Some say they're testing boundaries, seeing how far they can push before the army responds." Though she recognized the deliberate manipulation, Eliza couldn't prevent a flicker of concern. Have there been actual attacks? "Not yet," Jenkins admitted, "but patterns are changing. Ever since Chief Grey Thunder's son returned with stories about a white woman who sheltered him, there's been unusual movement along the borders, almost like they're mapping settlements, identifying isolated homesteads." The implication hung between them, neither subtle nor accidental. Jenkins was suggesting her act of mercy had endangered others by encouraging Cherokee interest in vulnerable targets. "Grey Thunder honors the peace. Treaties," she stated with more confidence than she truly felt. "He's maintained peaceful relations for years now." "Treaties," Jenkins scoffed. "Paper promises that last until they decide otherwise. The chief might say all the right words to army officers, but savages remain savages at heart. Rather than engage further, Eliza completed her purchases in silence. As she prepared to leave, Jenkins delivered his parting shot. "Just remember, Mrs. Blackwood, if trouble comes to this valley because boundaries got blurred, folks will know where it started." The veiled threat followed her through Riverford's single street, where divided sentiments manifested in greetings offered or withheld. By the time she reached the valley trail leading back to her cabin, Eliza's thoughts had turned from Jenkins' warnings to more immediate concerns, namely the darkening sky that threatened another snowfall before she could reach home. The first flakes began falling as the forest closed around her, not the blinding blizzard that had delivered wire to her doorstep, but steady accumulation that would add inches to already challenging trails. Eliza urged her mare to a faster pace, hoping to reach the cabin before conditions worsened. Halfway home, a sound above the wind's whisper caught her attention, rhythmic and deliberate, unlike the forest's natural voices. She reined her horse to stillness, listening intently while scanning surrounding trees. Nothing visible through the thickening snow, yet the sensation of being watched prickled across her skin. "Hello?" she called, voice swallowed by muffling whiteness. "Is someone there?" No response came, but as she prepared to continue, movement flickered between distant pines, a shadowy figure that appeared and vanished too quickly for identification. Not animal, but human, moving with purposeful stealth parallel to her path. Fear constricted her chest as Jenkins' warnings echoed. In her thoughts, Cherokee warriors, mapping settlements, watching isolated homesteads. Had her moment of mercy marked her as target rather than an ally? Urging her mare forward, Eliza maintained constant vigilance, one hand near the small revolver tucked into her coat pocket. The presence shadowed her journey, sometimes visible as brief movement among trees, sometimes betrayed only by intuition that raised hairs on her neck. Never approaching, never retreating, simply watching her progress through the deepening snow. When her cabin finally appeared through swirling flakes, relief flooded through her until she noticed fresh tracks crossing the clearing. Multiple visitors who had circled her home during her absence. The prints, already filling with new snow, revealed moccasined feet rather than boots, confirming her fears about who had visited while she was in Riverford. Approaching cautiously, Eliza surveyed the cabin exterior for signs of forced entry or damage. Finding none, she dismounted and led her mare to the small stable attached to the north wall. Only after securing the animal with fresh hay did she approach her front door, revolver now drawn against potential ambush. The cabin interior remained exactly as she had left it, fire banked safely, supplies undisturbed, no sign of intrusion, despite the tracks outside. Yet as her initial fear subsided, Eliza noticed something new placed precisely at the center of her table. A small deerskin pouch decorated with beadwork patterns similar to those Wire had carried. Heart pounding, she approached the mysterious offering. The pouch, when carefully opened, contained 3 items, several dried herbs she didn't recognize, bound with sinew, a carved bone whistle no longer than her little finger, and most surprisingly, a folded paper with English words written in careful, unpracticed script. "Medicine from my grandmother, for winter sickness. Whistle calls friends if enemies come. Wire." The simple message provided both reassurance and new concerns. The Cherokee boy had fulfilled his promise to return, bringing gifts that offered protection and alliance rather than threat. Yet his presence, likely accompanied by warriors, judging from the multiple tracks, indicated ongoing Cherokee interest in her cabin that would only intensify Jenkins' suspicions if discovered. As darkness claimed the forest outside, Eliza pondered the complex position she now occupied. Neither fully part of the settlement nor accepted by the Cherokee, she existed in unmapped territory created by one simple act of humanity during a blizzard. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by sounds that might have been wind against window glass or soft footsteps in fresh snow, guardians or threats, impossible to determine from within her cabin walls. Morning brought clear skies and confirmation that her visitors had been more numerous than initially suspected. In daylight, the tracks revealed at least 6 warriors had surrounded her cabin, their patterns suggesting a protective formation rather than threatening encirclement. More intriguing, a stack of split firewood had appeared beside her door overnight, enough to last several weeks, arranged with obvious care. Eliza touched Grey Thunder's pendant, which hadn't left her neck since receiving it. The chief was honoring his obligation to the woman who saved his son, extending protection through practical means rather than empty gestures. The realization brought complicated emotions, gratitude for unexpected alliance, concern about how settlement neighbors would interpret Cherokee warriors visiting her homestead, uncertainty about where such connections might lead. These questions occupied her thoughts as February progressed into March, winter maintaining its hold on the mountains. Despite subtle signs of eventual thaw, Eliza continued her solitary routines, but with growing awareness that solitary no longer accurately described her situation. Though rarely seen directly, Cherokee presence revealed itself through small signs. Game animals left near her stable, tracks that circled her property during nights when distant wolves ventured too close, once even a small fire built and carefully extinguished near her spring when ice had made water collection dangerous. Settlement reactions evolved as, the division Jenkins had fostered gained momentum when trapper Henry Wilson reported seeing Indian signs near Eliza's cabin during a hunting expedition. Though she neither confirmed nor denied Cherokee visits when questioned at Sunday service, her silence was interpreted as admission by those already suspicious of her loyalties. Minister Parker, who had always been kind to Eliza since Thomas's death, sought her out after the service, while others maintained pointed distance. "People are afraid, Mrs. Blackwood," he said gently. "Fear makes them quick to judge what they don't understand." "And what don't they understand, Minister?" she asked, watching Jenkins gathering a group of men outside the small church. "That compassion isn't choosing sides," he replied, surprising her with his insight. "That helping an injured boy doesn't make you any less part of this community, nor any more part of his." His words captured exactly the peculiar isolation she'd been experiencing, rejected by some settlers for showing kindness to the enemy, while still fundamentally separate from the Cherokee world that now watched over her cabin. "Samuel Jenkins doesn't see it that way," she observed. "He's convinced I've endangered everyone by encouraging Indian interest in our settlements." Minister Parker sighed, his breath creating white plumes in the March chill. "Samuel lost everything to a Cherokee raid when he was just a boy. His hatred has deep roots that logic can't easily touch. The boy I helped wasn't responsible for what happened to Jenkins' family," Eliza pointed out. "He wasn't even born then." "Grief doesn't always distinguish between individuals," the minister replied. "For Samuel, all Cherokee are interchangeable, representatives of those who destroyed his childhood." Their conversation ended as Jenkins approached, several men following in his wake. The confrontation Eliza had been anticipating for weeks could no longer be avoided. "Mrs. Blackwood," Jenkins began without preamble, "the Settlement Council met yesterday. There's concern about your continued association with Cherokee visitors." "I wasn't aware Riverford had a formal council," she responded, buying time as curious onlookers gathered. "Times change when safety's threatened," Jenkins countered. "Henry Wilson saw Indian tracks all around your property last week. Others have noticed similar signs. You're either being watched or visited regularly." "Minister," Parker attempted intervention. "Samuel, Sunday service hardly seems the appropriate—" "When's more appropriate to discuss Christian behavior?" Jenkins interrupted. "The widow Blackwood has been consorting with heathens, putting every family in this valley at risk. They're learning our patrol patterns, mapping our defenses." Murmurs rippled through the growing audience, some nodding agreement, while others showed discomfort with the public confrontation. Eliza maintained her composure despite her racing heart. "Chief Grey Thunder's son was injured and caught in a blizzard. I helped him as any Christian would. The Cherokee have shown gratitude, nothing more." "Gratitude?" Jenkins scoffed. "Is that what you call warriors circling your cabin at night? Strange form of thanks." James Miller pushed through the crowd to stand beside Eliza. "I was there when the chief came for his son," he reminded everyone. "He had 60 warriors and could have attacked, but chose peace instead. That suggests honorable intentions, not the treachery you're implying." Jenkins wasn't deterred. "Honor? They're savages playing a longer game, using this woman's naivety to gather intelligence. Every visit reveals something new about our settlement's vulnerabilities." The accusation hung in the air, dividing the crowd between those nodding vigorous agreement and others showing skepticism about Jenkins' increasingly conspiracy-laden theories. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mr. Jenkins?" Eliza asked directly. "The council believes you should relocate to town," he replied, "where your visitors can be properly monitored. Your isolated cabin provides too much opportunity for unobserved meetings." The implication that she might be actively collaborating, rather than merely receiving occasional Cherokee acknowledgement, sparked outrage Eliza hadn't known she was capable of feeling. "I will not abandon my home because of unfounded suspicions," she stated firmly. "Thomas and I built that cabin. It's all I have left of him." "Then perhaps you should consider what Thomas would think of his widow entertaining Indians at his hearth," Jenkins countered. The cruel suggestion silenced the crowd. Even those who shared Jenkins' concerns about Cherokee activity recognized he had crossed a boundary in questioning a widow's loyalty to her late husband's memory. Before Eliza could respond, Sarah Miller pushed forward to stand beside her husband and Eliza. "My Jacob fought Indians for 20 years before we settled here," she declared loudly. "He always said you could tell a lot about folks by who they feared most. Seems to me Samuel fears Cherokee more than he fears the Lord's judgment for bearing false witness against a neighbor." The unexpected support from one of the settlement's most respected women shifted the crowd's mood perceptibly. Jenkins found himself suddenly defensive rather than leading righteous condemnation. "No one's bearing false witness," he insisted. "The tracks don't lie. She's having regular Indian visitors." "And has any harm come to the settlement since these visits began?" Minister Parker asked calmly. "Any stock missing? Any cabins burned? Any children taken?" Jenkins had no evidence of actual threat to present, only theoretical dangers based on historical grievances. His silence allowed the minister to continue. "It seems to me Mrs. Blackwood has achieved something remarkable, a peaceful connection between peoples who rarely interact without bloodshed. Perhaps, instead of condemnation, we should be seeking to understand how one act of compassion created goodwill where there was only suspicion before." The theological framing challenged the settlers' perceptions of the situation. Many remained uncomfortable with Cherokee presence near their community, but the minister's interpretation offered a possible positive reading rather than automatic assumption of threat. As the crowd's unified support for Jenkins fractured into more nuanced positions, Eliza realized the immediate danger had passed. The council would not force her from her home today, yet the underlying tensions remained unresolved. Jenkins' hatred merely checked temporarily by community standards of proper behavior toward widows and ministerial authority. "This isn't finished," Jenkins promised quietly as the gathering dispersed. "The next time Cherokee cross settlement boundaries, folks will remember who welcomed them first." The confrontation marked a turning point in Eliza's already altered life. Though allowed to return to her cabin, she did so knowing that both communities now watched her with heightened attention. Settlers monitoring for evidence of conspiracy, Cherokee observers maintaining their mysterious protective presence that simultaneously defended and endangered her. As she prepared for the final difficult weeks before spring thaw, Eliza understood that the simple act of saving one wounded boy had irrevocably changed her place in the complex human geography of the frontier. No longer simply Thomas Blackwood's widow, struggling alone against wilderness, she had become something unclassifiable, a boundary crosser in lands where boundaries determined survival. The carved wolf wire had given her seemed to watch from. Its place beside her hearth as spring's first tentative warmth began softening winter's grip on the mountains. Something new approached with the changing season. Not just renewal of the natural world, but transformation of human relationships that had followed predictable patterns for generations. Whether that transformation would bring reconciliation or deeper conflict remained to be seen. But as Eliza added wood from the stacked Cherokee hands had provided to her evening fire, she acknowledged that some thresholds once crossed permitted no return to previous certainties. She had stepped beyond the invisible borders separating settler from native, Protector from protected, observer from participant. Whatever came next would unfold in unmapped territory where compassion had temporarily overcome fear, creating possibilities neither side had previously imagined. April brought the first true surrender of winter's hold on the mountains. Snowmelt swelled creeks to rushing torrents, exposing earth that had lain dormant beneath white blankets for months. Tender green shoots pushed through softening soil as nature's cycle resumed its ancient rhythm. For frontier settlements, spring's arrival meant renewed connection with the outside world as mountain passes cleared and supply wagons once again braved treacherous trails from eastern towns. Eliza welcomed the changing season with practical enthusiasm, turning soil in her small garden plot and setting out seedlings started indoors during winter's darkest days. These early plantings represented not just food security, but continuity, carrying forward traditions her mother had taught in Boston gardens that seemed a lifetime away from this mountain existence. The settlement's spring dynamics had shifted perceptibly since the confrontation after Sunday service. Where Jenkins had once been the unquestioned voice on Indian matters, doubts had taken root following Minister Parker's theological challenge to his position. Though few settlers openly supported Eliza's connection to the Cherokee, many had begun questioning whether all native interactions necessarily signaled threat. This subtle shift manifested when Riverford organized its traditional spring gathering, a communal celebration of winter's passing where isolated families reconnected. Through shared meals, music, and trading of supplies preserved through the cold months. In previous years, Eliza had received an automatic invitation delivered by Sarah Miller. This spring, the invitation came with hesitant qualification. "Some folks suggested you might be more comfortable not attending," Sarah explained apologetically during her visit to Eliza's cabin. "Samuel has been influential with certain families." "I see," Eliza replied, continuing to knead bread dough with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "And what do you think, Sarah?" The older woman sighed, her weathered hands smoothing her apron in a nervous gesture. "I think breaking bread together is how communities heal divisions. James and I both want you there." The simple sincerity of Sarah's statement touched Eliza deeply. "Then I'll come, if only to support those who've supported me." Sarah's relief was visible. "Good. The gathering needs voices like yours, people who see beyond old fears to what might be possible." As her friend departed, Eliza wondered what exactly Sarah meant. She had never considered herself an advocate for Cherokee settler relations. She had simply helped an injured child as basic humanity demanded. Yet increasingly, that single act positioned her as representative of possibilities beyond the entrenched hostilities that had defined frontier existence for generations. The day before Riverford's gathering, Eliza noticed unusual movement in the forest surrounding her property. Not the occasional Cherokee observers who had maintained distant vigilance since Grey Thunder's visit, but concentrated activity involving multiple individuals moving with purpose rather than stealth. Initially fearful that Jenkins might have organized armed men to protect her from native visitors, she watched from her cabin window with Thomas's old spyglass. What she observed instead sent her heart racing for entirely different reasons. Grey Thunder himself, accompanied by 8 warriors and, most surprisingly, Wire, had established a temporary camp just beyond the tree line, marking her property boundary. Unlike their previous arrival in full war regalia, they wore garments that blended traditional Cherokee elements with items adopted from white culture, a deliberate modification suggesting diplomatic rather than martial intent. Uncertainty rooted Eliza in place as she considered the appropriate response. Direct engagement might be interpreted as further consorting with Indians by settlement critics. Ignoring their presence seemed equally problematic, discourteous. At minimum, potentially dangerous if misunderstood as rejection of previously established connection. While she deliberated, the decision was made for her. Wire separated from the group, approaching her cabin with measured steps that revealed his leg had indeed healed well, though a slight favoring of his right side remained visible. He carried something wrapped in tanned deerskin, his young face, composed in formal dignity that seemed incongruous on one so young. Touching Grey Thunder's pendant for reassurance, Eliza opened her door before the boy could knock. "Wire!" she greeted him, careful to remain within her doorway rather than step outside where watchers might observe. "Your leg has healed well." The boy nodded, his English noticeably improved since their last encounter. "Walking patterns you showed helped. Grandmother says white medicine woman knows good healing." The compliment from an unseen Cherokee healer carried significant weight in its acknowledgement of cross-cultural medical validity. Before Eliza could respond appropriately, Wire continued with unexpected formality. "My father comes with purpose," he explained, indicating the deerskin-wrapped object he carried. "Brings speaking gift for settlement gathering tomorrow." Eliza's surprise must have shown clearly, as Wire added, "Cherokee scouts hear many things. Know about the spring meeting." The revelation that Cherokee observation extended to detailed knowledge of settlement activities confirmed Jenkins' suspicions, though not his interpretation of malicious intent. More immediately concerning was Grey Thunder's apparent expectation. "Regarding settlement interaction, Wire," she began carefully, "the gathering may not welcome Cherokee presence. There are still many who fear your people. Not come to the gathering," he clarified. "Send a gift with you. Speaking gift that tells the truth about winter meeting. Corrects lies some settlers tell. The distinction proved crucial, not physical. Attendance that would provoke confrontation, but symbolic representation through appropriate cultural channels." Grey Thunder understood frontier social dynamics better than Eliza had credited, recognizing that object exchange provided a safer communication pathway than direct interaction in current circumstances. Accepting the wrapped bundle, Eliza felt its surprising weight and heard slight movement within. "What is it?" "Father explains," Wire replied. "He asks to speak with you. At the edge of trees where both peoples can see meeting happens in the open. No secrets." The location request demonstrated further cultural sensitivity, positioning their interaction where both Cherokee observers and any watching settlers could witness everything, preventing accusations of clandestine plotting from either side. After brief consideration, Eliza nodded agreement. "I'll meet him at the boundary stones in 1 hour." The granite markers Thomas had placed years ago to delineate their property provided natural neutral ground between territories. When she approached the designated meeting place carrying the still-wrapped bundle, Grey Thunder waited alone, his warriors remaining visible but distant among the trees. The chief's imposing physical presence remained unchanged, but his attire reflected deliberate, diplomatic choices. Over traditional buckskin leggings, he wore a cavalry officer's jacket with chief's insignia carefully sewn onto the shoulders, creating a visual bridge between military authorities both sides recognized. "Medicine woman," he greeted her, using the title Cherokee had apparently assigned rather than her name. "Spring brings new growth from winter ground." The poetic phrasing contained metaphorical significance beyond seasonal observation. "New possibilities from difficult circumstances," Eliza translated conceptually, earning a slight nod of approval from the chief. "My son lives because your heart sees beyond fear," Grey Thunder stated directly. "Now Cherokee and settlers reach an important time, either grow new understanding or return to old killing." The stark assessment aligned with Eliza's own sense that their unusual connection represented pivotal opportunity rather than merely personal interaction. Samuel Jenkins speaks against any understanding between our peoples, she admitted. He has followers who believe Cherokee presence always means danger. Man whose heart died with his family, Grey Thunder observed. We know his story, sad path that never leads from darkness. The chief's awareness of Jenkins' personal history surprised Eliza, suggesting Cherokee maintained detailed knowledge of influential settlement figures and their motivations. Intelligence gathering certainly, but apparently for understanding rather than exploitation. Grey Thunder gestured toward the wrapped bundle she still held. Speaking gift tells the truth about Cherokee intentions, shows the difference between the Wolf Clan and other tribes who break peace. With careful movements that carried ceremonial significance, he unwrapped the deerskin covering to reveal an intricately crafted wooden box decorated with symbols, both familiar from Wire's medicine pouch and others she didn't recognize. Opening its hinged lid exposed contents that momentarily confused Eliza. Several dried plants, mineral specimens, a small pouch of seeds, and most surprisingly, a silver cavalry button. Medicine box, Grey Thunder explained, indicating each item: plants that heal winter cough, stones that purify water when crushed, seeds that grow strong even in mountain soil. He touched the silver button last. This from a soldier who honored treaty words with Cherokee, reminder that some white men stand beside promises. The collection represented practical survival knowledge, shared across cultural boundaries. Medical treatments, water purification techniques, specialized agriculture adapted to harsh mountain conditions. Not weapons or threats, but mutual sustainability tools. These help both peoples live through difficult seasons, Grey Thunder continued. When settlement gathering happens, show this medicine box. Let truth speak about what Cherokee offer beyond war. The strategic brilliance of his approach struck Eliza immediately. Rather than defensive reactions to accusations or demands for settlement acceptance, the gift demonstrated practical value in peaceful exchange. The box itself would become visual evidence contradicting Jenkins' single-dimensional portrayal of Cherokee as threatening savages. Some won't listen regardless of what I show them, she cautioned. Truth needs time to grow roots, Grey Thunder acknowledged. Plant seed now, harvest comes later. The agricultural metaphor carried particular weight in frontier communities where seasonal cycles governed all aspects of existence. Patient cultivation, rather than immediate transformation, represented a realistic approach to generations' deep conflicts. As their meeting concluded, Grey Thunder touched his chest in a formal gesture. Wolf Clan remembers those who walk an honorable path. Medicine Woman's cabin remains under protection. The continued promise carried both reassurance and complication. Safety against potential threats, but ongoing connection, that settlement. Hardliners would interpret as dangerous alignment. Your son has recovered well, Eliza observed, changing focus to personal rather than political. His spirit seems strong. Pride briefly transformed the chief's stern features. Vision Quest brought unexpected lesson. Through suffering, he learned to see beyond outer skin to inner heart. Important wisdom for future chief. The revelation of Wire's destiny added a new dimension to their fateful encounter during the blizzard. Not just any Cherokee youth, but heir to tribal leadership had been placed in her care, a fact that explained the extraordinary response his disappearance had triggered and suggested deeper significance to their continuing connection. Grey Thunder raised his hand in a formal farewell gesture. Until the next meeting, Medicine Woman, may the Great Spirit guide your words when the medicine box speaks. Returning to her cabin with the gift, Eliza contemplated the complex position she now occupied. Increasingly recognized by Cherokee as a cultural intermediary, while simultaneously viewed with suspicion by many settlers. She balanced precariously between worlds that had defined themselves largely through opposition to each other. The following day dawned clear and mild as Eliza prepared for Riverford's gathering. She dressed with careful consideration, her best calico dress demonstrating respect for community standards, while Grey Thunder's pendant remained visible at her throat, acknowledging ongoing Cherokee connection without flaunting it. The medicine box, rewrapped in plain cloth rather than ceremonial deerskin, accompanied her journey into town. Riverford's central square had been transformed for the spring celebration. Tables laden with communal food offerings formed a perimeter around open space where musicians tuned fiddles and banjos. Children darted between adults in rare freedom from chores and schooling, their excitement infectious after months of winter confinement. Eliza's arrival created momentary pause in conversations nearby. Sarah Miller quickly approached, linking arms in public demonstration of support that didn't go unnoticed by watching settlers. "Glad you came," Sarah whispered. "Certain parties have been suggesting you might choose Cherokee Company over Christian Fellowship today." Jenkins stood across the square, surrounded by men who nodded at whatever he emphasized through sharp hand gestures. His gaze locked with Eliza's briefly before deliberately turning away in pointed rejection. Minister Parker proved an unexpected ally, approaching directly with a hand extended in greeting. "Mrs. Blackwood, your presence honors our gathering. I was just telling Mayor Collins about your remarkable experience this winter." The introduction to Riverford's newly appointed mayor, a position created as settlement growth, required formal governance, represented significant social legitimization after months of community marginalization. Collins, a heavy-set man, with thoughtful eyes behind wire spectacles, studied Eliza with undisguised curiosity. "Minister Parker speaks highly of your courage, Mrs. Blackwood, says you've achieved something unprecedented in establishing peaceful communication with Grey Thunder's people. I simply helped an injured boy," Eliza demurred. "The Cherokee chose to view that as meaningful rather than insignificant." "Meaningful indeed," Collins agreed. "Territorial governor's been seeking diplomatic inroads with Cherokee leadership for years. Your accidental connection might provide the foundation for something more substantial." The political implications had never occurred to Eliza. Her focus remained intensely personal. One injured child, one decision based on fundamental humanity rather than broader applications to territorial relations. "I'm hardly qualified for diplomacy," she protested. Collins smiled slightly. "From what I hear, qualification has found you rather than the reverse. Sometimes history turns on such unexpected moments." Their conversation attracted a growing audience, including several families who had previously maintained distance from Eliza. Recognizing the opportunity to share Grey Thunder's message with receptive listeners, she indicated the wrapped bundle she carried. "The Cherokee chief sent a gift for today's gathering," she explained, unveiling the medicine box. "He calls it a speaking gift, meant to demonstrate peaceful intentions." As interested settlers gathered closer to examine the intricately carved box, Jenkins pushed forward, suspicion evident in his rigid posture. "Indian trinkets mean nothing. Their promises are empty as wind," Minister Parker countered immediately. "Perhaps we should examine what Chief Grey Thunder wishes to communicate before dismissing it, Samuel." The gentle rebuke from spiritual authority created space for Eliza to open the medicine box, explaining each item's significance as Grey Thunder had shared. Settlers listened with varying expressions, some openly skeptical, others showing genuine interest in practical knowledge that could benefit their mountain existence. Mayor Collins examined the cavalry button with particular attention. "Captain Marshall's insignia," he identified, surprising Eliza with his recognition. "He negotiated the Ridge Valley Treaty 3 years ago. Most decent man I've encountered in territorial affairs." the mayor's validation of the symbolic object undermined. Jenkins's dismissal of the entire gift as meaningless trinket. Several settlers who farmed the challenging mountain soil showed particular interest in the specialized seed varieties, asking detailed questions about planting techniques and growing conditions. As the gathering's formal meal commenced, conversation throughout the square frequently returned to the medicine box and its implications. Not universal acceptance of Cherokee outreach, but genuine curiosity about possibility beyond the rigid hostility that had defined relations for generations. Jenkins maintained vocal opposition, gathering like-minded settlers who nodded vigorous agreement with his warnings about Indian treachery disguised as friendship. Yet noticeably fewer people clustered around him compared to previous community events, his influence visibly diminished by the competing perspective the medicine box introduced. As afternoon progressed into evening celebration with music and dancing, Eliza found herself approached by settlers who had previously avoided her. Their questions revealed emerging recognition that frontier existence faced challenges that might be better addressed through knowledge exchange than perpetual conflict. "Those water-purifying stones," James Wilson ventured hesitantly. "My family's spring turned brackish after last autumn's earthquake, if they truly work." Others asked about medicinal plants, agricultural techniques, weather prediction methods, practical knowledge edges increasingly valued on isolated homesteads where small advantages determined survival margins. Not acceptance of Cherokee people themselves necessarily, but acknowledgement that indigenous knowledge developed through centuries of mountain habitation might benefit those who had arrived much more recently to the same challenging landscape. As darkness gathered, and lanterns illuminated the square, Eliza observed a subtle but significant shift in community dynamics. The medicine box, prominently displayed on the central table where all could examine its contents, had initiated conversation impossible just months earlier. Sarah Miller summarized the transformation as they watched children playing games that would exhaust them before the long journey home to scattered homesteads. "You've planted seeds today," she observed, unconsciously echoing Grey Thunder's metaphor. "Not everyone's ready for them to grow, but ground has been prepared that was hard as stone before." Looking across the square where Jenkins continued holding forth to his diminished but dedicated audience, Eliza recognized both progress made and distance yet to travel. "Some soil rejects even the strongest seeds," she noted. "True enough," Sarah agreed. "But look there." She directed Eliza's attention to where several young families gathered around Mayor Collins, who held Grey Thunder's medicine box while explaining something with animated gestures. Children listened attentively, faces reflecting curiosity rather than fear regarding Cherokee-originated objects. "The young ones," Sarah continued, "they're the soil where new understanding might actually take root. Their hearts aren't hardened by old grievances they never experienced firsthand." As Riverford's spring gathering concluded and families departed toward distant homesteads, Eliza carried away more than empty food containers and the medicine box. Something fundamental had shifted in her relationship to the settlement. Not full restoration to her previous position, but evolution toward new role as bridge between separated worlds. Mayor Collins confirmed this transformation as he assisted her onto her mare for the journey home. "The territorial governor visits next month," he mentioned casually. "I'd appreciate opportunity to introduce you. Your unique position might prove valuable to broader peace efforts." Under starlight that illuminated her path home, Eliza contemplated how a single act of compassion during blizzard conditions had expanded beyond personal choice into potential territory-wide significance. Not through her own ambition or design, but through ripples spreading outward from one moment when humanity had transcended boundaries. 1 year had passed since the February blizzard that brought Wire to Eliza's doorstep. The mountain landscape had completed its full cycle of seasons. Spring's muddy rebirth, summer's brief but intense flourishing, autumn's fiery transformation, and now winter's return, though gentler than the previous year's brutal assault. Eliza's life had transformed as dramatically as the landscape around her. What began as an isolated widow's desperate survival had evolved into something unprecedented in the territory. A recognized position as unofficial intermediary between two worlds that had previously communicated primarily through violence. The territorial governor's visit to Riverford 3 months earlier had formalized this unusual role. After hearing first-hand accounts of her experience and examining Grey Thunder's medicine box, Governor Harrison had requested her assistance with upcoming treaty negotiations. "We need voices both sides trust," he had explained while sharing coffee. "Admire Colin's home. The Cherokee respect you for saving the chief's son. Our settlers increasingly recognize your commitment to both communities' well-being." The governor's endorsement had silenced many critics, though Jenkins maintained his opposition, now reduced to muttered comments when official visitors praised the Blackwood approach to native relations. His influence had waned as practical benefits of knowledge exchange became increasingly apparent throughout the settlement. Cherokee agricultural techniques had helped several homesteads survive unusual summer drought. Traditional medicine had controlled fever outbreak among school children when conventional treatments failed. Most significantly, Grey Thunder's warriors had tracked and captured renegade Comanche raiders who attacked outlying farms, demonstrating commitment to territorial peace that contradicted Jenkins' warnings about inevitable Cherokee betrayal. Yet the most profound changes occurred in less visible ways. Subtle shifts in how settlers and Cherokee perceived each other's humanity. Children from both communities occasionally gathered at neutral boundary areas for supervised play that transcended language barriers. Eliza's cabin had become an unofficial meeting ground where representatives could discuss shared concerns without formal treaty requirements. On this anniversary morning, Eliza stood on her porch, watching soft snowfall transform the forest into crystalline wonderland. Unlike the previous year's threatening storm, today's gentle weather invited contemplation rather than fear. She touched Grey Thunder's pendant, now complemented by additional tokens of appreciation from both communities. A silver brooch from Governor Harrison, a beautifully beaded belt from Cherokee women whose medicine traditions she had studied. Movement at the forest edge caught her attention, familiar approach rather than threat. Wire, no longer the wounded boy, but a young man growing into leadership responsibilities, emerged from the trees. Though still 3 years from formal adulthood by Cherokee standards, his bearing already reflected the future chief's dignity. "Medicine woman," he greeted her, using the title that had become her identity in Cherokee understanding. "Grandmother says snow brings quiet thoughts. Good time for remembering beginnings." The deliberate acknowledgement of their anniversary didn't surprise Eliza. Cherokee cultural memory maintained precise tracking of significant events through oral tradition, often commemorating them through ceremonial revisiting. "I was just thinking about last year's storm," she admitted, welcoming him inside where coffee, a taste he had acquired during increasing visits, waited on the stove. Wire accepted the steaming cup with appreciation, his movements displaying none of the previous year's hesitation or suspicion. Their relationship had evolved from rescuer and rescued to genuine friendship that bridged vastly different upbringings. "Father says changed seasons bring wisdom," he observed, warming his hands around the cup. "When the cold season returns, we understand the growth that happened during warm moons." The philosophical framing invited reflection on transformation both communities had experienced during the year cycle. While far from perfect harmony, relations had improved beyond what anyone might have predicted during those tense confrontations in Eliza's clearing. "There's been healing on both sides," she acknowledged. "Not complete, but beginning." Wire nodded, his English now fluent, though still carrying Cherokee sentence rhythms that added musicality to his speech. "Some wounds need many seasons. Jenkins still carries deep scars." The mention of her most persistent opponent didn't surprise. Eliza. Cherokee intelligence gathering remained effective, keeping Grey Thunder informed about settlement dynamics that might affect peaceful relations. "Some people aren't ready for change," she replied. "Perhaps never will be in their lifetimes. But their children might," Wire countered with unexpected optimism. "Young ones watch with new eyes." His observation echoed Sarah Miller's insight. During the spring gathering, hope resided not necessarily in changing entrenched perspectives, but in nurturing a generation that might approach old conflicts with fresh vision. Their contemplative conversation continued as morning advanced, sharing developments from their respective communities. Cherokee Winter Camp had relocated slightly closer to settlement boundaries, a strategic decision demonstrating confidence in improved relations. Riverford had established regular trading days where Cherokee could bring goods for exchange without fear of harassment, institutional progress unimaginable just months earlier. As Wire prepared to depart, he revealed the deeper purpose behind his anniversary visit. From his buckskin shirt, he removed a small object wrapped in ceremonial cloth. "Father sends this," he explained, unveiling a carved wooden pipe with unusual dual stem design. "Speaking pipe for important gatherings. 2 mouths, 1 breath." The symbolic significance transcended mere diplomatic gift. Traditional pipes represented Cherokee spiritual communication, with ancestors, with divine forces, with other humans in sacred contract. This unique design, with parallel stems emerging from a single bowl, embodied visual representation of different peoples sharing common purpose. "The governor's representatives arrive next week for preliminary treaty discussions," Wire continued. "Father says this pipe should smoke when important words are shared. Show's path forward requires both voices speaking truth." Eliza accepted the pipe with appropriate reverence, understanding its role in upcoming negotiations extended beyond physical object to philosophical framework. Treaty conversation occurring through shared ceremonial experience rather than adversarial positioning. "I'm honored to carry this to the discussions," she responded. "Its meaning won't be lost on those with eyes to see." Wire smiled slightly, rare expression that transformed his serious features. "Father says some see only smoke, others recognize fire that creates it. Treaty needs fire seers, not smoke watchers." The metaphorical distinction perfectly captured differing approaches to cross-cultural negotiation, those focused only on immediate treaty language versus those understanding deeper relationship foundations necessary for lasting peace. As Wire departed into gently falling snow, Eliza contemplated the extraordinary journey from that desperate February night to this moment of ceremonial exchange. Not simplified happy ending, but a complex ongoing process that required constant tending, like her garden's demanding cultivation cycle. Her reflections were interrupted by an unexpected approach, horse and rider moving steadily along the path from Riverford. To her surprise, Samuel Jenkins guided his mount into her clearing, his expression unreadable beneath frost-covered. At Brim, this first direct interaction since their confrontation at spring gathering caused immediate tension. "Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted stiffly, remaining mounted rather than dismounting, maintaining distance both physical and symbolic. "Mr. Jenkins," she responded neutrally, waiting for him to reveal his purpose. The trader shifted uncomfortably before speaking. "Mayor Collins asked me to deliver this." He extended the sealed envelope bearing official territorial markings. "Governor's office wants confirmation you'll attend treaty preliminaries." The messenger choice seemed deliberately provocative, sending her most vocal critic rather than friendly supporter. Yet something in Jenkins' demeanor suggested a different purpose beneath the official errand. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the envelope without breaking its seal. "Please tell Mayor Collins I'll attend as requested." Jenkins nodded but remained in place, clearly struggling with additional communication beyond his official task. Finally, he spoke with evident difficulty. "My granddaughter took fever last week. Dr. Maxwell couldn't break it. Sarah Miller suggested—" He hesitated, the words physically painful. "Suggested Cherokee medicine might help. Said you'd—" No. The unexpected request represented significant personal crossing. Jenkins approaching his ideological opposite for assistance involving beloved family member. Pride subjugated to desperate need. White willow bark tea works for some fevers. Eliza offered carefully, but Cherokee healers use a combination with purple coneflower root that's more effective for children. Jenkins' expression reflected an internal battle between a desperate grandfather and lifelong Indian hater. "Do you have this combination?" "I can prepare some," she confirmed. "The Cherokee women have taught me proper preparation." His jaw tightened at this confirmation of her ongoing consorting, but concern for his granddaughter overcame ideological objection. "How soon?" "Give me an hour to gather and prepare everything properly," Eliza replied, maintaining a matter-of-fact tone that neither highlighted his dramatic position shift nor demanded acknowledgement of it. When Jenkins returned, Eliza provided a carefully wrapped packet containing dried herbs with detailed instructions for brewing and administering the medicine. The entire interaction proceeded with minimal conversation beyond necessary practical details. Only as he secured the precious medicine in his saddlebag did Jenkins finally address the fundamental shift his request represented. "This doesn't mean I've changed my mind about Indians," he stated defensively. "A man does what's needed for the family." "Of course," Eliza acknowledged, respecting his need to maintain philosophical position even while contradicting it through action. "I hope Abigail recovers quickly." Something flickered in Jenkins' eyes, surprise at her knowing his granddaughter's name, perhaps recognition that her awareness extended beyond political opposition to genuine concern for community members, even those who rejected her. "Mayor Collins says you'll speak for settlement interests at the treaty meeting," he said abruptly, changing the subject from uncomfortable personal territory to public matters. "I'll represent what benefits both communities," she clarified. "Lasting peace requires mutual advantage, not one-sided concessions." Jenkins studied her with unexpected thoughtfulness. "You truly believe that's possible, after generations of bloodshed?" The genuine question, rather than automatic dismissal, represented its own form of boundary crossing. "I do," she answered simply. "Not easily or quickly, but possible through small beginnings that build trust over time." "Like medicines shared when children sicken," he acknowledged reluctantly. "Like that," she agreed, neither pressing the point nor demanding he recognize larger implications of this exchange. As Jenkins departed toward Riverford carrying Cherokee healing knowledge to aid his grandchild, Eliza reflected on this unexpected interaction's significance. Not dramatic conversion or philosophical surrender, but practical necessity, creating a small opening where rigid barrier had previously stood. The dual-stemmed pipe Grey Thunder had sent rested on her mantle beside, wires carved wolf and other symbols of her unique position between worlds. Not an official translator or government-appointed Indian agent, but organic connection, grown from a single compassionate choice during blizzard conditions. 1 week later, Eliza sat in Riverford's newly constructed meeting hall alongside territorial representatives and a Cherokee delegation led by Grey Thunder himself. The ceremonial pipe circulated according to Cherokee protocol before formal discussions began, creating shared experience that transcended language differences and historical grievances. Governor Harrison, attending in person to demonstrate the negotiations' importance, acknowledged her central role during opening remarks. "We gather today because one woman's courage created a possibility where none existed before," he stated formally. Mrs. Blackwood reminded both communities that humanity transcends the boundaries we create between us. Grey Thunder followed with equally formal acknowledgement. "Medicine woman sheltered my son when others would have left him to die. From single healing grew a path toward healing between peoples." Jenkins watched from audience seating. His granddaughter recovered through treatment he had previously rejected as primitive superstition. His expression remained guarded. Decades of hatred, not erased by single positive experience. Yet Abigail's presence beside him, healthy and curious about the unfamiliar Cherokee visitors, suggested greater openness to possibilities beyond rigid separation. As preliminary discussions progressed, addressing practical concerns like hunting boundaries, water access rights, and mutual defense against hostile tribes, Eliza fulfilled her unique function, not representing either side exclusively, but maintaining communication integrity between them. When settlement representatives misinterpreted Cherokee concepts, she clarified meaning. When Cherokee delegates reacted to unintended provocations in settlement proposals, she provided context that defused potential offense. During brief recess, Sarah Miller approached with gleaming eyes. "You've changed everything," she whispered. "Look around this room. Cherokee and settlers sharing the same space without weapons drawn. Miracle no one thought possible." "Not a miracle," Eliza corrected gently. "Just people discovering common ground when given the opportunity to see beyond differences." As discussions resumed, she caught Wyer's eye across the room, where he observed proceedings as Grey Thunder's heir and future negotiations participant. The young man whose suffering had initiated this unprecedented gathering nodded slightly, acknowledgement between two people who understood how profoundly small acts could transform entire communities. The treaty being formalized would require months of detailed negotiation, years of consistent implementation, generations of continued commitment to principles established in this preliminary gathering. Perfect resolution to centuries of conflict remained distant aspiration rather than immediate reality. Yet watching Cherokee and settler representatives engaged in substantive discussion rather than armed confrontation, Eliza recognized the extraordinary distance already traveled from that desperate February night when she'd found wounded boy in blizzard conditions. The journey forward would contain setbacks and struggles alongside progress. Jenkins and others, like him, would maintain opposition born from personal trauma and generational fear. Cherokee traditionalists would question compromise with those who had taken ancestral lands. Perfect reconciliation might remain beyond reach during their lifetimes, but as winter sunlight streamed through meeting hall windows, illuminating faces engaged in conversation rather than conflict, Eliza understood that transformation had begun, that could not easily be reversed. The humanity glimpsed across cultural boundaries would continue influencing those who had experienced it, spreading outward to children and grandchildren who might build a future beyond historical grievances. 1. Small act of compassion during desperate circumstances had created an opening where none existed before. Through that opening, possibility had emerged. Fragile but persistent, challenging generations of separation with simple recognition that beneath surface differences, common humanity connected all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories. Right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.